Today, I'd like to take a look at the changes that are coming in the registration regulations for overseas food producers who are exporting to China. And these changes were announced in the middle of April by the GACC, that's the General Administrative Customs for China. And basically, the new regulations will be valid from the 1st of January 2022. Which doesn't leave very much time for food producers to actually register their factories and their manufacturing facilities. One change, though, that is certainly for the better is the fact that the certificates will now be valid for 5 years instead of the 4 years that they were previously. Now, up until now, it was basically manufacturers of higher risk food products who had to register with the authorities. So that included things like meat or meat products, dairy, including especially infant formula, fish and other aquatic products, and bird's nest. So the legal basis for this change are two regulations. One of them is the Decree 248. This is the new version of the registration and management rules for overseas manufacturers of imported food. And Decree 249 is a supporting version with additional information. So this is a new version of the admin rules for food safety and import. The biggest change, though, to all of these regulations is that for the future, all overseas food manufacturers now need to be registered with GACC in order to be able to export to China. So there will be in the future two different processes for this application for the import license or the export registration, let's say, depending on the level of risk of the product that you are producing. So the first one is for those products which are deemed to have a higher level of risk or which are deemed to be for more sensitive groups of consumers. And in this case, you'll need a recommendation via your local competent authorities. This is quite similar to the process that was already in place for products like meat and dairy up until now. And I guess it's just been extended to more product groups, and there are potentially some changes in the documentation. And the second option, this is for less risky products, and they can be registered directly with GACC by the manufacturer themselves, or what I think is more likely to be a practical route via an entrusted agent. That's somebody that you give a power of attorney to in China, who has a good established relationship with the authorities and who can take care of that for you. So the product groups that have been defined as needing the recommendation from your local authority in order to be able to register are the ones that I've listed here. And you can see they're basically animal products in one way or another, or they're plant products which can be quite sensitive in terms of food safety and hygiene, as well as products for people in sensitive groups and things like food supplements, which are always a little bit tricky because they're not pharmaceuticals, but they're also quite sensitive in terms of science and food claims that are behind them. What you need to reckon with, though, is that in some way, shape or form, your factory or production facilities will be audited by the GACC. However, this new regulation gives them more flexibility as to actually how they audit you. So I'm guessing that this is going to depend quite a lot on if your country has a bad record with food safety issues, or if something comes up in your industry as a food safety issue, and of course the COVID situation and the travel regulations that there are in China at the moment. So for the future, there'll be the potential to have what they're calling a written documented audit. This is presumably the kind of thing that meat producers have had for, say, Hong Kong or Singapore in the past, where you basically just had to give them a whole lot of photos of your facilities and a lot of written documentation and your procedures. So it was basically a huge pack of paper that they would then base their decision on. The second option is a video option, where I haven't seen further details yet, but I'm guessing that you would walk them through various parts of your factory and storage areas for them to see the procedures. The third part would be the traditional on-site audit. And the fourth option would be a hybrid model of any of those other three. So what is certainly regulated is that the audit team has to be composed of more than 2 people in order to ensure that it's an objective decision that they're making. So what documents do you need for registering on this first, more complicated process of via local authority recommendation? Well, first of all, the local authority needs to issue basically a formal recommendation letter for your production facilities. They also need to list all of the manufacturers that they are applying for, as well as your application forms that are filled out. Then there have to be the supporting identity documents for each manufacturer. And as far as I can see from the regulation at the moment, the only thing that's specified right now is a copy of the business license issued by your local authorities. Then there has to be a statement which is countersigned by the authorities that you as a manufacturer are able to meet Chinese regulations and that you guarantee that you will do so. This is maybe quite a sensitive part of it because it's not always that easy to meet those regulations. There should be then the audit reports, review reports from the local authority that they are making regular visits to you. So if you're in the world of meat or dairy production, this is probably nothing new, but perhaps for some of those other manufacturers, then this could be a new step in the process. And I'm not quite sure yet how each competent local authority is planning to manage that. I haven't seen any details up until now. Then, depending on your type of product and procedures, they might request additional documentation referring to the food safety, hygiene, GMP procedures in your factory. So those could be things like floor plan of the factory, floor plan of your cold storage areas, and how you maintain hygiene and your flow through the factory. It could be your HACCP certificate copy. Just remember the Chinese also have an own certification for HACCP, which I'm sure that in this case they would prefer to see their own rather than the general EU version. So if you have the option to do the Chinese one additionally, and you think it could be a hard push to actually get the registration, then it might be worth thinking about. Or, for example, process flowcharts as to your production process so that they see how exactly you're working and what safety precautions that you're taking. Now, if you are looking to register directly or via an agent, so for example, if you're selling a product like beverages or you're selling chocolate, then the documentation required is much simpler. So you just need the application form, your supporting identity documents in the same way as in the other process, and the signed statement that you promise to comply with the requirements of Chinese regulations. So to sum it all up, in future, all overseas food manufacturers need to register, and the actual application method depends on the perceived level of risk. The Chinese authorities also do have the um, opportunity, if they decide that for your industry or for your country the level of risk has changed, they also have the right in future to change the method of your application procedure. You should expect that at some point, potentially not in the beginning, but at some point during the course of your certificate lifetime, that you will be audited in some way. You, as a manufacturer, have a level of responsibility for ensuring your legal compliance with the Chinese guidelines and food safety regulations. And also, your importer is obliged to include your export registration number on their application for the import license. So they are kind of pulled into the responsibility more than in the past to make sure that you really have the right registrations for your products. Now, I personally expect that a transition period will be defined for this, but I haven't seen anything concrete yet. So it's a huge amount of work to audit and to pull together all of these um, documentation that's requested. And I think that at the moment, there's still not all of the information, the supporting documentation to explain to applicants as to how they should. There's not all the supporting documentation to explain to documents how to, um, let's say, how to manage their applications, which I usually have seen that the Chinese authorities will come out with some assistance for you. So you need to keep an eye on this and contact your authorities to find out what their methods are and whether you are affected by this more complicated registration process that you will need in future. So I think that those are the main points right now, but this is certainly a topic that if you're, especially if you're already exporting to China, you need to keep a very close eye on, because I would expect that for those companies who are exporting already, you will be the ones who have to comply first of all, obviously, rather than someone who's planning to export in the future. And right now, there's no clear information available as to exactly how long they expect this process to take. So keep an eye on it. If you would like more support on this, then please do contact me and I will do my best to get very specific information related to your case as to how it looks for the future. Thank you.